I am Couch Coop, and today we're going to talk about all things Sucker Punch, including the film, which has nothing to do with the studio. Sucker Punch developed the Sly Cooper series, I think 4 games in total, the first one coming out in 1999. The most experience I have is with the Thieves Raccoonus sequel that came out in 2002. Why does that date ring a bell? It's got a lot to do with Alex at Digital Foundry on the previous video. My experience with the first Sly Cooper was kind of an external one. A mate had it, all I could do was just sit there and watch them play through it. Now they were getting in vehicles, doing missions, exploring various semi-open world sections of the map. This game was around with the sort of Spyro craze, but it was so much more than that. It almost played like a good versus evil, with playing as different characters, loads of different traversal. It was really something else, and if you look on YouTube, you'll see a lot of creators pointing back to the Sly Cooper series as something that was extremely strong. And remember that Sony hasn't made the acquisition for the studio yet. That happens in 2011. Also going to look at Second Son and Ghost of Tsushima. We'll be pronouncing that differently every time.
I spend most of my life behind bars. It's easy enough to bust out.
Infamous Second Son is a super important game for me. It was so early in the PlayStation 4's life cycle that it was kind of a must-have. Back in 2014, can you believe? The PlayStation 4 released in Americas and Europe at the back end of 2013. So this was out super early, didn't have a lot to compete with, and trying to make a name for the system, and it did, by God. On that base level PlayStation 4, this thing was rocking it, both with physics, graphics, a massive open world. It really did look incredible. Then it had a second wind with giving us some upgrade for the PlayStation 4 Pro, which was super interesting, better HDR implemented, a boosted frame rate, up above 40, but not a PEG 60. Then the saga continues in 2022, when we saw a next-gen patch come in and give us a PEG 60 frames per second. Looking at it now, I guarantee you're not thinking 2014. There's Assassin's Creed games that have come out in the last few years that look worse than this. It's an incredible piece of software and holds up extremely well. It was the initial inspiration to put this video together, plus I was dying to play a bit of Ghosts.
What you're imagining right now, you control this world.
Look, I didn't say that.
Well, guess I shouldn't put it off then.
I'm also going to be inserting random clips of Zack Snyder's 2011 Sucker Punch, a film that fell on both sides of the critic fence. Some people loved it. Personally, when I first clapped eyes on it, I thought it was one of the best things ever made. It hasn't aged too well, and neither has Schneider's material, but for me it's like the filming equivalent of a kid playing around with these action figures, and that sort of works. I really appreciate it as early work from that director. You don't get gratuitous slow-mos and pans like you do in Sucker Punch, the film. It really is a standalone piece of work, let's just say.
If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
I'm also playing a dangerous game with the old Sentinel copyright bots. Longer than 6 seconds. It's like a cat and mouse thing. I think I might actually enjoy it. Most YouTubers would never risk losing all of their money on a video. Because of the channel size, I'm relatively safe on that front. Alright, let's knuckle down. Let's talk about Second Son, why it's a really good superhero open world game, and how it still holds up against a lot of present day releases. Forgive me for not talking about the earlier Infamous games. That's kind of a blind spot for me because they were PlayStation 3 exclusive, but this feels like an Insomniac game. It feels a little bit like Sunset with that traversal that's just completely addictive. The powers and the game structure are very much go anywhere. This is 2014. We haven't seen Spider-Man, the new gen, come out, or Breath of the Wild. You have like a dash followed by a glide, which you can alternate, which gets stronger the more you progress in the game. But initially, you need some height to get across larger areas. You can't really directly traverse up buildings like Spider-Man. You kind of need to use obstacles, but more importantly, the vents. Every building has a teleport to the top via a smoke vent. This game completely revolves around smoke and the consuming of it to give your powers regular topping up. is also completely obsessed with the touchpad, and this is a sign of the times. You will all probably remember when that pad came out, every game was like, oh my god, we've got a freehand surface on our controller essentially, so just about all the tasks require a swipe. It is a bit annoying because that pulls your fingers away from the face buttons, but it's fun and it's still a novelty that I enjoy. You don't see a lot of touchpad integration on the PlayStation 5 pad. That's more about the haptics. Can you commandeer vehicles? No. And I think that's helped fill up this city with quite a lot of volume because they're not worrying about it having to be vehicle traversed. Let's talk about this city in a bit more detail and your powers and what happens when you use them essentially. This is a little bit like that Guerrilla Red Faction game, which didn't really have any bolted down structures in its missions. This does have permanent areas, but all the lampposts, all of the DUP structures, more importantly, which is like the evil police in this game, their bases can just be taken apart bit by bit. You can blow up base level structures, you can get involved with bridges collapsing. It's very much untacked down as a feel for an open world game. If you go into like Cyberpunk, GTA 5, you'll realize how much destructive dissipation is actually put in this game. Now your primary weapon starts off as a little like zap that you have on R2, but this can be increased to give a massive sort of grenade like shotgun blast, and then you get smoke to sort of incapacitate a lot of the enemies. You'll notice that there's this like Red Dead Good Evil thing going on as well. You can rescue civilians, you can subdue enemies as opposed to kill them. This gets put towards a point system, so you could play this game evil, and that's something I never looked at, and I probably will on the latter half of this playthrough. We are due a clip from the Sucker Punch film. I think I may have said this before about games that came out 2016, 2017. I had to pick up the physical box and look at the back of it to really believe that this is a 2014 game. I know we're looking at loads of buffs and sort of update perks, but still, whoa. And if you've never played it, this is a gem in the PlayStation 4's back catalogue and really one of Sucker Punch's strongest releases. I really hope we see more out of this series because superhero open world games kind of a massive thing now and they're not done that well as far as I'm concerned. Sticking on that superhero theme, at the start of the game you feel quite OP. You're dealing with like normal civilian police officers, but then the villains start cranking up and it starts putting enemy characters in which have got equivalent, if not better, powers than yourself, and you have to start using these jumping tactics and avoiding things and filling up smoke tactically to fight them. It's very full on. Their attack patterns are really good. It's some of the better open world AI programming I've seen. Probably should talk about its performance and any sort of glitches. Open world games can be notorious for this. Relatively clean looking model here, and it's had 10 years over to sort of get itself together, but I played this game on first year of launch and it was kind of a flawless release, to be fair. And again, I don't need to stress that it was a very different time. We don't need to pull up umpteen examples of brand new AAA open world games that came out of the gate on their asses.
Well, found the victim. Definitely the work of a conduit. It's very showy.
Okay, I need you to take a couple pictures of the crime scene and send them to me.
The neons and reflections really deserve mentioning. That HDR implemented improvement was quite a big headline. It was the first sort of steps in the direction of 4K and the Pro being a pretty powerful machine against that base level system. Its day and night system also is sort of weird. I think it forces you into a dusk at the beginning, and then as you cycle through that campaign, a little bit like the Spider-Man series, the time changes relative to where you are up to with progression. Wanted to mention lastly is its takeover setup. So it's done on a sort of percentage, occupation. I really love that idea. You see that in Far Cry games and a lot of early Just Cause titles. You've got to smash down the presence of the authority to get somewhere. And that means you can approach stuff from any different angle and just take that number down the way that you see fit. That's a really cool direction for open worlds to go in. And Second Son is an essential visit on the PlayStation 5, I will say that. Definite boosts and a real nostalgia rush, and a game that still thrashes loads of stuff out there. And yes, we are due a clip from the film.
Begin your journey. It will set you free.
So here we are, I get to talk about Ghost, by far one of my favourite PlayStation 4 exclusives and one of the best games to come out of Sucker Punch Studios to date. Let's just be clear on what we're looking at. We are not looking at the PlayStation 5 Director's Cut standalone SSD edition. This is the PlayStation 5 running my base level version of the game. And in 2022, we saw a 60 frame per second boost put in via a patch. So I'm a little bit reluctant to purchase that newer game because of its cost, and I've got so many titles that I purchased on my PlayStation 4 that have had free upgrades and run amazingly on the SSD, The Witcher being one, Doom Eternal being another, even the infamous Cyberpunk being a third. I'm really interested to hear if any of you would have spotted that if I hadn't declared that we're not looking at a true PlayStation 5 version of this game. My God, these graphics made that PlayStation 4 the sellout system it is today. This was absolutely incredible on launch. OG God of War, this and that Spider-Man 1 were three games that you kind of wanted to buy a PlayStation 4 for. I've held it up against across all of the Samurai Ninja games on 9th generation system. This has been scrutinized to hell by my good self. Even compared it to some Assassin's Creed games. It's got amazing traversal techniques in the level, getting you to be able to climb up mountains. There isn't almost to go anywhere with this map. But it's this non-Soulsy combat that I love. It's all about combinations, realistic blocking animations. You end up doing rolls and slashes because you're linking up moves and just looking so good. This game is incredible at making you feel empowered. That statement also points me towards its story, who you are, the whole island mechanics and taking down the enemies camp by camp. It's got a brilliant idea with upgrades and exploring directions with your ordnance or even a lot of your sword techniques. You can switch out on the fly. This does borrow a little bit from the Nier games, but the way it implements its combat and how smooth everything feels, it really is unique. It's kind of something else. I was sort of looking for some Sly Cooper DNA in this game, even some infamous hints. And I suppose there are a little bit with that rooftop, going across ropes, doing a little bit of sneak. But this is such a new IP in so many respects. It doesn't follow the tropey footsteps that a lot of combat and open world games have, particularly with swordplay. And it also blends the horse and horse-based combat and bow and arrow range combat into just flawless flow, and that doesn't get to be said about a lot of games in this genre. That initial moan at the beginning about having to shell out for an SSD version of this game sort of gets cancelled out with the free Legends mode we got offered. This changed so much with the game. If you don't know, it's an online sort of monster yokai based feudal DLC which is in a nightmare world, crazy creatures everywhere, you're scored heavily, it almost plays a little bit like a roguelike run. It's a hell of a piece of free content to be given, and it just bred new life into the game. Unlike Infamous Second Son, we are dealing with a dynamic weather and day and night system, and this breeds some amazing scenes. And I did want to point on the music and the flutes, the way everything is subtly integrated when you move around the map. Breath of the Wild's a little bit like that. You've not got any pounding themes coming through dramatically. This is a very majestic and graceful looking and sounding game. There are also rumours of a sequel going around at the moment. That's another reason I put this video together. Whether or not Sucker Punch actually push a second one out to be what I consider quite a close state to its original game is another kettle of fish. I'd like to see something more in the Infamous direction. I want a decent superhero game out of them. And yes, apologies, we are long overdue a clip from the film. Do you own the PlayStation 5 Director's Cut of Ghosts? And if so, can you put in the comments if that purchase was worth the upgrade? I'm kind of thinking it is, and if my financial situation gets better, I'll immediately trade in this base level copy for it. The other game that pulled this was Death Stranding, also offering a standalone, and from what I see, a pretty amazing SSD PlayStation 5 version of that game, and I've only ever seen it on a Pro, so I'd also be really keen for feedback on that one. I think we should also close off on the game's absolute no holds barred violence, blood splatter and killing techniques that just are everywhere in the game. It is horrific in areas, and it really is true to its historical canon with a lot of the gore and weapons and creatures used to attack you. And I also want to be clear that you saw no cutscene footage. All of this slow stuff is all in game, and the HUD, the UI just goes flush whenever you are not in combat or it's not needed. It's a great dynamic system. Horizon Zero Dawn has the same. I also want to be clear on the point that this video was nothing short of a celebration of the studio that is Sucker Punch, and what an incredible bunch of developers who gave us two absolute belters for our PlayStation 4s and 5s. I have, of course, been Couch Coop. Please like and sub. I will see you down there.